Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October 2021 regular school board business meeting. My name is Becky Fluss. I'm the chair of the board, and I will ask board members to introduce themselves, starting.
Nancy Portillo Brown.
Helen McGough.
Nicole Medor. Sophia Matthew.
Patrick Saucier.
Veronica Babcock. Becky Fluss.
Peregrine Boldman-Masiak.
Alyssa Tracy.
Matt Lillybridge. Jim Lothbridge.
Thank you. Administrative staff.
Pat Hopkins, superintendent. Karen Moody, building principal of Lower Richard School.
Vicki Duguay, building principal of Riverview.
Katie Gould, principal at Helen Thompson School. Christina O'Neill, principal at Pittston Randolph Consolidated School. Angela Hardy, director of curriculum. Alicia Morris, director of special services.
And Terry McGuire, I'm the director of technology.
No, Andrea's homesick.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get started, when Pat and Veronica and I were establishing the agenda for this meeting, we talked about maybe going over our operating rules one more time. It was 17 months since we were in the boardroom together when we were meeting remotely. And on Zoom or Google Meet, it's a little different interacting together. So board members, it would be really helpful if when you want to be addressed or you want to speak, if we can remember to raise hands and be called on. And if I see 3 hands up, I'll say, Nicole, Colin, Nancy, and we'll just go in that kind of order so we can focus on what's being said and keep order in the room and keep, this is our business meeting. We just want to keep it moving along as best as we can and not take a lot of people's time unnecessarily. So, and the same with the public. If you have something you want to say,
During public comment.
during the public comment, absolutely. It's not interactive with the board, but if there's something you would like to say during the public comment piece, please raise your hand, state your name, the community that you're from. And we ask that you would limit it to 2 minutes. And I would ask for somebody on the board to be our timekeeper.
I don't mind this time, if you want me to.
Sure.
And as a reminder,
Mhm.
since we are on camera, that whenever anyone speaks, if administrators as well as members of the public to use the podium, that would be helpful.
Yep. So with that, let's go through the agenda. First item on the agenda is public comment. We have one letter. Would you like, yes, would you like to?
I would like to. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Soros, and we are from the Pittston community, and we have 3 girls that go to school at the Pittston Randolph Consolidated School. I guess it's more just a question for something for you guys to think about. How do we know that masking is working? Because we haven't tried the school year at all without a mask. So my theory is, how can you say that it's working if we haven't been tried without them on? So I guess it's just some food for thought.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maurice Susi. I live in Randolph and I have kids that go to Gardner Middle School and to Pittston Consolidated School. I was just wondering if any other parents, there's not a lot of them here. My daughter is a 6th grader at the middle school who has been yelled at from a teacher who pulled her mask off to yell at her because her mask was down below her nose. What kind of science does that follow? What kind of leadership is that to our children? My daughter's in 6th grade, it's her first year in middle school. She's excelled in every year. She's in the REACH program. She's been in gifted and talented programs at the previous school she's been in. She never gets in trouble. She always gets good references from every teacher she's ever had. So her first year at middle school, she's getting yelled at with a woman taking her mask off, screaming in her face because her mask is down like this. And that's okay. I mean, what kind of science is that? Is that the same science that says there's more than 2 genders that you guys try to push? I just, things have gotten out of control and the parents really got to step up and I feel like you guys aren't doing anything for us. I really feel like you guys are just there to fill a seat. And it's unfortunate because these are our children, you know. We're trusting them with you and your teachers. And this is what you do to them. And that's okay with you guys because we're saving lives. I just wish everybody here would just think about what the schools are doing and what they're doing to our children. And I wish that you guys would really consider taking the masks off. Every one of the masks says not for coronavirus, but that's okay for you guys because apparently this has never been about safety. It's always been about compliance. You guys want to put your thumb on us and control us. And we're tired of it. And things have to change. And that's all I have to say. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Susi. Right. Oh, you write this letter, I'm so sorry. We do have one email from a constituent. Good afternoon, board members. After attending my first school board meeting last month, I walked away with more questions. So I figured the only way that I would potential answers would be if I reached out myself and asked them. First off, thank you for revisiting the mask question at each stated meeting. You mentioned in the last school board meeting that a negative test would be required to return to in-person learning. In my experience, this was not the case last year and was treated as time served. Why would this be required this year if it was not last year? Assuming a child is ill with the symptoms and is asked to stay home, what would the procedure be if the parent and or student refused to test? Last year, one of my children came home with a mask that did not belong to him on 2 separate occasions. Is there anything that is being done to help prevent that? Per the letter that went out to parents on 8/20/2021, in the case of a quarantined student, 3 to 12 will have the opportunity to participate in their learning environment remotely. Yet in the last board meeting, it was stated that there will not be any remote learning. So if you are allowing students who are in quarantine to participate while in quarantine, so how will the privacy of the student in question be kept a secret? For instance, will the entire class know or see that a particular student has been singled out and allowed to work from home? I could see that becoming a topic of other children picking on the student who got stuck in COVID timeout. I would like to address the high school as well and know how mask breaks are working for them. Do they have structured ones as the lower grades do? The reason I ask, my high school student has returned home every single day with a migraine. With being an asthmatic myself, it is hard enough to breathe when you add the mask, and it makes it darn near impossible. Lastly, please consider the fact that there were instances last year while masked and socially distanced where children brought this virus home. My high school student brought it home, and so I also came down with it. Yet my husband and son, who stayed with us while we were sick, never came down with it. Even with my son snuggling with me and my husband slept in the same bed. I'm a firm believer that they already had it before COVID was even announced. They didn't catch what came to our home from the high school because they already had it. So please, when reviewing the masking issue, please keep in mind that there are those out there that have been vaccinated and there are those out there who have already had the virus and have had a wide spectrum immunity to it. Thank you, Karen G. West Gardner. This is the time for public comment. We are allowing each person who wants to speak 2 minutes. Are either of you here to make a public comment or just to be here?
No, we're here to make a comment.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Then if you would state your name, the community you represent, and go to the podium. We have a timekeeper for 2 minutes.
Okay. All right.
I'll let you talk first. No,
Well, come on up. We have 2 minutes, so let's stop. So we're just here to talk about the mask mandate. My husband has a something from work. It measures oxygen levels. And we understand you guys are, you know, we understand your situation, but we feel that it should be a choice for the parents to choose what's best for the kids. Our personal opinion is that they're not necessary. They're actually more unhealthy than anything. It takes a
So
second for this to turn.
just for reality, I work construction, and to go into any construction hole, or even in this room. So we're reading 23.5. So 20.
Did we introduce ourselves?
You did not.
I'm sorry.
I'm Dan
No.
Coops, I'm representing Gardner, Randolph, that's and everything.
Samantha Coots, our daughter's Taylor, she goes to Gardner Middle School.
Thank you.
So the O2 in this room is 20.9. So in here, this alarm won't go off.
I'm gonna take my mask off for a second so you can see. Can I see this? When I put it up to my mouth, it doesn't make an alarm. There's plenty of oxygen.
Let's put some mask on. Just to see what it does, what your oxygen level.
And this is a fairly thin mask. Some of the kids wear cloth masks like you have on.
So when that goes off, I tell my guys out of the hole, out of this room. I'm sure you've been director on this before. Every police department has, they actually have them.
10 seconds left.
Just the point, you can't, the H2O, you know, you're not getting enough oxygen in these masks, is the way I feel.
I'm a hairdresser. Some of the clients that I've talked to, kids play sports and they're required to wear masks playing sports. One coach is outside, which is inside. They're running out of the fields, are running out of the building to breathe. So we're just bringing some information.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
May I ask one quick question?
Sure.
With that meter, sir, is that the CO alarm?
Yep.
The CO2 alarm, excuse me. Thank you.
Gases, any gases, CO2, anything, yeah.
Thank you.
I have all the books on it, if you want to read them.
I've read those books. I'm very
I
familiar
just
with
read
those. I
them
didn't know
pretty
what
well,
gas meter it was, if it was the CO2 or if it was just the low oxygen level alarm that was there.
It's got everything on it.
Thank you.
And then filters are brand new, so I'm not trying to prove nothing, you know.
I have access to the same meter and I understand the calibration of it. I just want to know what gases were. Because there's different gases for each meter, so you can get different sensors. So thank you for that information.
I want to thank you guys for coming and for speaking with us. And we're not, I want to assure you, we're not listening to you. I know that's a double negative. We're not listening to you. We are visiting this every month as we promised we would do. None of us wants to be sitting here wearing a mask. None of us wants your kids to wear a mask. None of us are doctors or epidemiologists. And we are a group of individuals that once we're elected, we answer to the legislature of the state of Maine. So I would encourage every parent who has an issue with all of this, contact the CDC, talk to them.
Can I say, don't you answer to the people, like of the towns? I don't know about this. a lot,
No,
so-
and that's a common misnomer and no.
So how do
That's the
other
short term.
schools? not
Every
have mask
school
mandates?
board has the same responsibility to the state legislature.
So how does like Auburn School and
Same
Calais
thing.
and places like that, they don't have mask mandates though?
The superintendent doesn't decide how that goes down of their district.
No,
So how many kids would it take to, if you,
we're off topic here. Way off topic.
not really. Not,
Well-
if I tell my kid tomorrow and then I call all of my friends' parents, which I'm pretty well known around here,
I know you
don't
are.
wear your mask,
Yeah.
what happens then? You gonna kick my kid out of school because it doesn't have a mask on?
Yes. Yeah,
Really?
All of the
So
kids?
how does that change? Just because the CDC says that masks are good to have on outside too?
As long as the board has set a mask mandate, there is a law that says that the superintendent can remove students who are not abiding by any type of health standard that's been set forth. So yes.
So you just said the board made the decision on that. So couldn't the board make the decision to not wear a mask?
That's why we're talking about this every month. The board every month is making the decision whether to require masks or not.
Do you vote on it every month?
yes.
Oh, you guys?
Yeah.
Just you guys,
Well, so we have
not the community?
We have a committee, a health safety committee that meets monthly and studies the data that comes from a number of places, DHHS, the CDC, the DOE. There's a spreadsheet that comes from the DOE that encompasses the entire state and who's wearing masks and who's not wearing masks, how many outbreaks and infections that they have, and it's updated daily, and we get a copy of it weekly. So we're not just sitting around deciding to wear masks. We're following a process. I can't answer why other districts don't do it. I can say that there are many districts, according to the spreadsheet, that started without masks that are now masking because they were having to go remote because there were so many cases in their communities.
Or just maybe their school board stood up for what was right. Maybe that's why they're not wearing masks there. That's
Maybe.
also an option that we don't want to look at.
And that's your opinion, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that, and I thank you for being here and for making your comment. We're going to review and approve the agenda minutes. Are there any prioritizations, any changes to the
Yes, I
agenda?
have some changes to the agenda. So under number 8, on page 2, general information, I'd like to add Brooke Moran as Ed Tech 1, a district Ed Tech 1, and she will be at the Gardner Regional Middle School. Under new business, need to add creation of a new English language learner teacher. And then I'd like to add 2 executive sessions. The first one would be an executive session to discuss the Bus Driver Association contract, and the third one is to discuss the Educational Technicians Administrative Assistance contract.
Motion to approve the agenda as altered.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Nancy, second by Cullen. Any questions or comments? Yes, Jim.
For the English language learner teacher, what language is she specialized in?
It is not any one specific language, it's for any of our students who
Is she
require.
multilingual or, he or she?
No, she is not.
okay? All I want to know, thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Motion carries. Approval of minutes, previous meetings, regular board meeting of September 2nd. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Cullen, second by Matthew. Questions, comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Recognitions and celebrations. We have one. Nancy. Nancy, it has been such a pleasure. I can't even tell you what a pleasure to work with you. And if I was better at jumping, I would leap with a single bound over to see you. Thank you so much. And we're not in code anymore. I'm gonna hug you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Correspondence.
As written, resignation to bus drivers.
Okay. And committee reports. Dropout prevention.
I believe the minutes are in the board, they're either in the board packet, they are. So if you go to your board packet, they're there.
Finance committee, minutes are also in the board packet. Policy committee.
Tony is not here. Is there anyone else on policy committee that would like to take the lead?
Sure. Let me get up to speed on that quickly. Yes. So just as written here, the first readings for 3 policies. And then we have a need to meet pretty swiftly before the next board meeting, as we all saw the email with the new, I don't know if you call them policies or what you call them, legislative statutes, okay, yeah.
As a
So,
result.
As a
right,
result
right.
of that, yeah, so we'll be revisiting sort of our meeting and interacting online and such, and then these policies are written.
Could you expand a little bit on BED? Or do you want me to expand on?
Sure, I can start, and do you want to chime in? That's fine, yeah, so remote participation in school board meetings, so as we just demonstrated, we have a public comment section of the meeting when people are here and they're able to publicly speak to us, that's fine. It's easier, obviously, in this forum to interact with people where we couldn't do that online. So if we open up our meetings to be also available remote, like let's say I wasn't able to be here for some reason, I wanted to join, then all of the public would have the same recommendation. So we were talking through the best way to do that logistically with Terry's assistance with the new technology as well. So there's still some things we're discussing, but I think we've sort of tweaked the paragraph a little to be still accommodating and make sure the public can obviously see a live stream, interact at the meetings, and still send in emails, but I'll let Pat elaborate. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if I could elaborate, so the new law allows you to hold remote meetings under certain conditions. And so the policy committee looked at what all of those conditions were. And what they're recommending is that we only have remote meetings in cases of a state of emergency or in a regional meeting, at which time, Becky, you would be the person responsible for identifying it as a region, as some sort of regional emergency.
Mhm.
If you have that meeting remotely, then as Alyssa said, you need to make sure that it's open for members of the public to also participate remotely. But that's the only criteria that they are recommending in this policy, that we meet remotely. Other than that, all of our meetings will be here in this or somewhere in our district, and members of the public will need to join in person, and you will all need to be here in person. Okay,
Thank you, Pat. Yep.
so that was a motion.
Yes, please.
Okay. Second by Veronica. Questions?
Policies for a second.
No.
All those in favor? As a first reading?
First reading.
Motion carries. Thank you, Alyssa.
I think she's getting there. Student rep.
Student rep.
I'm ready. Okay, so I have some exciting things, some very, very exciting things. So first, this is a little bit time sensitive. So there's a student council yard sale on October 9th at 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's to help raise money for scholarships, school events, sponsoring a family at Christmas, and other donations throughout the school year that the student council makes. Donations for the yard sale can be dropped off at the Gardner High School during school hours, which is 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. until the 8th. So that's tomorrow, which is short notice, but this is the first time we've gotten to talk about it. And then I have the Interact Club, the Rotary Club, and JMG are holding their second annual trunk or treat at the EJ Prescott headquarters. That's October 14th at 1 to 5 p.m. It's free.
When it's the 24th, not the 14th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote that in my notes wrong, thank you. I thought that date sounded weird. It's open to the community. We wanted to thank Mr. Prescott for allowing us to be there and hosting us so nicely.
Could I add one more thing?
Yes,
Only because I'm part of Rotary, so I'm very familiar with this.
that's awesome.
Individuals who wish to participate and want to have a car, they need to go online and register.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, I have that.
Sorry.
Email Ms. DeSoto for the details. People who decorate their car and go pass out candy and stuff like that. And we're also looking for candy donations. They can be dropped off at the high school between 7 and 2:30. And they're anticipating 400 to 600 kids this year, which is amazing. Okay, and I have the drama club. We'll be presenting the Laramie Project on November 4th, 5th, and 6th. The story is told in 3 acts. It's very compelling, a cast of 26. There's cameos of Mrs. DeSoto and an alumni from last year, Brian Henderson, who is also eager to work as a director in this coming semester. We're hoping to have in-person audiences pending the COVID situation as dates near. We're really hoping, because it would be awesome to see another drama show in the Little Theater. Civil rights team is meeting in person. That's the same for most all clubs in the high school now, which is amazing. I got to attend a Latin club meeting, which made me very happy. I haven't got to do that in a very long time in person. The membership in most clubs has risen, seeing as we are in person now. And the civil rights team is gearing up for the Day of Welcome on November 5th. It's a project sponsored by the Maine's Attorney General. It's just making everyone feel welcome and understood in the high school. Okay, and last night, the National Honor Society had an in-person induction, which was amazing. I was there, it was super cool. We got to induct 24 new members and we have 45 now, which is amazing as we're gearing up for the Thanksgiving turkey baskets, which we are still having this year. We're starting donations soon. I don't have a date on that yet. But last night I got to play the role of cameraman. So I sat by the stage and I got to stream the entire induction for everyone who couldn't attend in person. And that is on the National Honor Society Facebook page. And we were trying to keep the numbers somewhat low. That's why we also streamed it. So we were wondering next year, pending COVID, if we would send invitations to the staff and the board to see the NHS induction. Sophie was also there. She's one of our new inductees, which is amazing. And we have some upcoming projects with NHS that are community service projects. We're planting tulips with Miss Butterfield to raise awareness about mental health. And we're cleaning up the middle school cross-country trails. So we hope they have a cross-country path for the middle school. And Thanksgiving turkey baskets. And that's what I've got.
A follow-up question?
Sure.
So on the cross-country trails,
Yes.
is that the one on the 23rd with Rotary and Interact Club, or is that something different on your
I
own?
believe so. I believe so. Yeah, it's on the,
23rd?
yes, it's on the 23rd.
Great.
Like
Lots of students there.
Nice.
hopefully get those
That's
trails
great.
cleaned up for the community.
Nice. Thank you, Gwen.
Mhm.
Wellness Committee.
There is a summary of their meeting in your
Yes.
folders.
Yeah, we were able to get to the Gardner Common and just sort of sit outside and interact, and it was just a good time to sort of meet new people. And I think we're still planning to do what we talked about last year, where we may travel around. We actually talked about using the trails behind the middle school for the next meeting. And then whoever shows up, and it's just very collegial, so it's a great group.
Being outside as much as possible before it
Yes.
gets too cold to be outside.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Alyssa. Ad hoc committees, Hoke Field Committee. We continue to meet, and it looks as though, knock on wood, turf will be delivered on Monday.
For next week.
It's still in October.
Ideally, they're hoping Monday, but depending on transportation,
Mhm.
you know how that goes.
Barring any
Um,
more COVID cases with truck drivers and.
Right,
other
like
things
like
that
we
make
had with
them
the
delay.
modular,
Right.
but it
Right.
looks like they'll be here next week.
So we're very excited about that. Finally, been a long time coming. We continue to meet and talk about the recognition wall and to work on the concession stand and we're just continuing on, but we're mostly excited to have the turf installed.
We also talked this last time about some sort of ribbon cutting ceremony. And so we don't know the details, what that will look like at this point. And we're working with Nate Sever, to see what type of game we can play. We have to be really careful with the Maine Principals Association and their rules and regulations. So it may have to be like a black and orange game, meaning only our own students would play, but we're working on doing something as a way of letting people see the field and play on the field before snow arrives.
So that would mean we can only compete against each other rather than another. But
That would still be fun.
that would still be great. It'd be nice to see our kids on our turf. That would be perfect. General information,
Just as written.
nominations, none, old business, the Health Advisory Committee.
Okay, so the Health Advisory Committee, which again, we talked about this at the last board meeting. The purpose of the committee is to gather and review COVID data to present to the school board at its regular meeting, so that you can vote on whether you're going to continue the universal mask mandate or not. And so they gather, they review, and then they make a recommendation to you. And so, as I mentioned, I think I shared this information with you at the last meeting, that they're going to review student and staff COVID cases and close contacts, review the Kennebec County transmission levels using US CDC COVID data tracker, review the student and staff vaccination rates, and they'll be developing a recommendation. And on that particular page, I provided links for all of that information. So the committee is made up of Matt Lillibridge, is representing the board, as is Matt Marshall. We also have Jessica Rubishkin, who is a parent and a pediatric nurse. We have Rachel Fisk, who is a parent and assistant state veterinarian. We have Kristen Martin, who is the MSAD11 lead nurse and the Pittston Randolph Community Consolidated School nurse. We have Christina Bordelais, who is the Riverview Community School nurse. We have Michael Coco, who is a high school teacher, and he is representing the Teacher Association. Cindy Kropp, who is a middle school ed tech, and she is also the Ed Tech Administrative Assistant Association President. We had Tiffany Cockrell, who is the Assistant Principal and Instructional Support Person at Helen Thompson. Sarah Sims, the Gardner Regional Middle School Principal. Chad Kempton, the Gardner Area High School Principal. Gabe Dostie, who is the Director of Operations and Maintenance. Angela Hardy, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and myself. And we met on Monday. So we're trying to meet the Monday before the board meeting so that we're getting the most current, accurate information to be able to share with you. So I thought I would go through very quickly the information that I shared with them so that you would hear the information that was presented to them, and then I'll let you know what their recommendation is for you to consider. So I reminded them and would remind you that schools that have that universal mask mandate are permitted to deem a classroom close contact for quarantine purposes within 3 feet for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period outside of the classroom in common spaces, such as in the cafeteria. The close contact for quarantine purposes, it remains to be anyone within 6 feet. Without the mask mandate, we would be looking at 6 feet in classrooms and everywhere else. As of Friday, October 1st, we had 36 students in quarantine from Gardner Area High School, the middle school, and Pittston Randolph Consolidated School. And while I don't have the exact number of what that would have been if it had been 6 feet, given the workload that our nurses have been under, that is not something that we've been collecting. But just speaking, just anecdotally to our building administrators and our nurses, we know that that would have been considerably higher than 36. So the vaccination rates for students right as of Monday were 55 to 59% for those who are eligible. For staff, it was 77% the end of August 31st. And I just received the new information for September. This was just submitted today, as a matter of fact, to the Department of Education. And so in August, we were at 77, now we're at 70, I'm sorry, now we're at 82. The high school has gone up 2 percentage points. The middle school has gone up 4. Helen Thompson has gone up 10, up to 84%. We have LER up 4%, Pittston Randolph up 7%, Riverview up 7%. Other municipal, other multiple buildings, that would be our bus drivers and anyone who has to travel between buildings. It would be the central office. And it's only the central office people who go into buildings. So it would not include like our secretaries who don't leave the central office. That's gone up 6, and our substitutes have gone up 8%. So overall, we're up 5%. And that doesn't mean that they're all new vaccinations that have occurred within the month. That's just the new forms that we've received. It's possible that some of these folks didn't fill out the form prior to the deadline before, and now they're doing so. So we're up to 82%. At the time, there were 2,578 total cases in schools across the state. There were 108 outbreaks. On that particular day, the news media had reported just that morning that there were 45 schools in Maine that had already gone remote. The high school did come close to having to go remote last Friday because we had so many staff members who were out. We didn't have enough subs to cover it. So staffing shortages are definitely a concern that we will continue to deal with over the course of this next year. In MSAD11, we've had 1 outbreak at the high school that dated back to September 6th, but the CDC didn't inform us until I think it was the 23rd of September because they're so far behind in their paperwork. When I spoke to the CDC regarding that outbreak, they informed me that it was community spread. It was not spread from within the building. The person made that very clear. There's 1 possible outbreak at the Pittston Randolph Consolidated School. However, we still have not heard officially from the CDC whether that is accurate or not. As of last Friday, we had 5 positive student cases in the school and 0 staff cases. Since the start of the school year, since last Friday, we've had 33 positive student cases and 1 positive staff case. With the COVID tracker, Kennebec County continues to be a high transmission rate in red. Over a 7-day percentage, the positivity rate in Kennebec County had increased by 0.2%. There were 508 active cases, though the total deaths count were down. Everyone had a chance to provide input, those who were there, and I will tell you that everyone was not in attendance. There were some people that could not attend. But of the people who were in attendance, the unanimous recommendation by everyone was to continue the universal mask mandate for another month. Who wasn't there? Just so you are aware, Gabe couldn't be there, Chad couldn't be there, Cindy Crop couldn't be there, but she did send an email saying that she supported it, and Matt Marshall couldn't be there, but everyone else was present.
And I spoke with Matt earlier and he said that he had talked with Kristen since he was not at the meeting and that he also supported the mask mandate for another month.
Okay, thank you. So that's the recommendation from the Health Advisory Committee.
So questions from the board?
Sorry, I started talking as I raised my hand and didn't wait.
It's fine. And I have such a hard time looking that way,
Yep,
as
it's
you know,
okay.
so.
If I may, Pat, I was gonna ask you, I think we talked about it before, are we able to see the minutes? I know it was just Monday, and here we are, it's Thursday, of that meeting or whatever you presented to us, just because it's more tangible than you having to necessarily sort of speak it all out to us, or?
We did not take formal minutes.
Okay.
I've summarized.
Okay,
Basically, did we record it? It was asked to be recorded. It has been recorded.
okay,
It's not a public recording.
Right.
But if there are individual board members who would like to come into the office to look at that recording, they
Okay.
can.
very good, thank you.
And I would encourage that if board members are interested in doing that, to come in and do that. Yes, Matthew?
One of the things I want to highlight at the meeting, because I was one of the people who was there, is I know for all the public comment of people who had questions about why we do a mask, the loudest voices at that meeting, and I'm paraphrasing, no one was yelling, were the school nurses, obviously medical experts. I'm not a medical expert. No one on the board is, as we've already stressed. And they're swamped as it is. That's why we can't figure out how many people might have gotten quarantined if it was 6 feet versus 3 feet. And they're the ones who said, it would be a million times harder to do my job, and I'm swamped on a day-to-day basis, even with masks. So if it went no masks, of those 45 schools that have already gone remote, the possibility could have been there. So the smart medical people who are taking care of your kids at all the schools, or the most trained ones, are the ones who made that or the recommendation to keep going with masks. And they're not elected, but they're the medical smart people.
Do they ever come to these meetings?
They have the ability to.
They do.
Jim,
I just anecdotally, I can tell you that I substitute teach at another school district. I was there Monday. And I was covering for a teacher. I covered for on Friday, then I covered, they were not expecting to have to come again. They called me to come in. And so I'm sitting there and I get into the second period. The next thing I know, the principal shows up. And another lady's with him. And they start measuring, they asked all the students to leave. So they need to talk to Mr. Lothridge. And I went ahead and stayed in the room. I didn't know if I was in trouble or what. Anyways, they started measuring my desk from where I sat to the next student out in front of me. Well, when I saw measurement being taken, I got very concerned. I figured I had a sneaking idea what was going on. And it turned out we had an active COVID case in a staffer. I was their substitute. I'm not going to mention who, it's nobody's business. So we all went down to the library, able to come back. They disinfected the whole room with one of the electrostatic machines that they use to clean them. And anyways, about 12 o'clock, they canceled all sporting events for the day. At 10 minutes past 2, school is out at 2:30. And the principal came over the loudspeaker and asked everybody's attention. And he said that effective immediately, the entire school, which is a middle school, high school combination, was going remote. I know the most impressive thing that happened was the kids in my class, and I usually I'm pretty confident taking care of my classes. I had one kid with a desk over her head. I had 1, 2, or 3 or 4 of them. I finally had to calm them down. Anybody that wanted to use a phone, that's verboten in the school. I told them they could call their parents. And then it took me 10 minutes to calm them down, then 10 minutes they're ready to go. They had to get their computers, they had to get everything, and if they didn't have good internet connection, they had to come to the office and figure out how to get something. Anyways, the kids were upset about having to go remote. And I mean, it was just as pandemonium for about 10 minutes. And I usually don't have a problem keeping a class controlled. I hate to use that word, but in this case, I had to control it. So anyways, and I have taught them all week as a remote teacher. I'm 72 years old and I had to learn how to teach remotely. Let me tell you, that was a learning experience. I have an appreciation for every teacher that has taught remotely for the last 1.5 years. It's a remarkable thing they've done. So anyways, the kids really want to be in school. We want them in school. It's not, I don't want them to have to, there's nothing I think is worse. I know you want to keep the mask up, and I appreciate that. I want to see the masks off, but I want to make sure we've got a healthy group of kids and we don't have to go remote.
Are they
Picking up
staying
enough time.
healthy with the masks on them?
Pardon me?
we have time with this.
Are
I'm
they
sorry.
staying
This
not
is
healthy with the masks on them? Do you think?
Samantha. Maybe you weren't here when I said it. The meeting isn't interactive. This is the board's. I realize Jim's looking at you and he's talking to you, but this
To
is
you.
our business
I'm-
meeting. So
I'm just trying to make a point that
Sure,
They really want to be in school. We want them in school.
I understand.
I'll shut up now. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and Jim, you told me you were gonna do this
Yeah.
tonight, and I really appreciate your passionate
I don't know how they did.
expression of it.
You know, synchronous learning, I cannot imagine how to do it. But they did.
I know, and it's really hard. Thank you, Jim. Yes, Matt?
Pat, I zoned out. Did we talk about the pool testing that we?
That's the next item on the
Okay.
agenda, so I'm doing them separately.
Okay.
Thank you,
this-
Matt.
Sorry,
Yes.
is this open discussion before we vote, or is there another?
This is the board's opportunity. This is our business meeting, yes.
I would be as tactful as possible, and I apologize, this can be very abrasive. I understand I'm just a stupid paramedic, but I do have 21 and a half years of experience in emergency medicine. When that gentleman came out with that machine, I can tell you exactly what second that countdown is on that for the self-testing. When you did that, I knew what you were doing. And it's so frustrating to be sitting here on this board and to have the information that I have. I'll give you an example as well. A few weeks ago, a friend of mine called me up. Her and her 2 teenage kids came down with COVID. They were miserable. She said, Pat, my PCP said, go home and wait it out. She said, what do I do? I gave her a list of 3 things to go get that you can get at Hannaford. And I said, if there's any respiratory compromise, add this one other thing. Another thing you can get at any pharmacy. And within 3 days, I got a phone call and she said, I don't know what happened, but my kids are negative. I'm negative. We feel better. And talking to her on the phone, I actually was concerned for her well-being. And it's frustrating because all this information is out there about COVID that the mainstream media, CNN, and I'll throw Fox News in it. Because I know that a lot of people say, well, you listen to Fox News. No, I don't. Fox News turned their back on the general public, in my opinion, for giving information. But we've gotten to a point now where you have one side of the story that can run rampant and is pushing fear and misinformation. And then you have another group that are getting banned from all the platforms. You get fact checkers. And that's the other thing. Fact checkers came out last year. When the hell did we as a society need somebody to sit behind a computer and say, this is misinformation, or this is partial truth? I posted a video of Dr. Fauci himself with nothing. I wrote nothing on it. No comments, nothing when it was posted. And it said partial information missing. And Dr. Fauci was talking about, and this was just before everything shut down, about masks not working. That I might stop one particle from going out. I can tell you right now, these masks don't work because of 21 and a half years of experience being forced to take respiratory protection. I can bring you to the CDC website where they put out last summer a warning for the people in the West because of all the forest fires that were going on. They stated that the masks do not protect them from smoke particles. Okay, what's the size of a smoke particle? 7 microns. What's the size of the coronavirus? 0.1 microns. Okay, let's trust the science. 0.7 is bigger than 0.1. Again, if it's not going to protect you from the smoke particles, it's not going to protect you from the coronavirus. And I understand the fear that's come with it, and I can respect that because when this first started at the firehouse, we had the news on 24/7 because this was affecting me and my livelihood. And one thing that I noticed is when this all started, they had 3 numbers on the screen: deaths, cases, and the third one they took away shortly thereafter because people were starting to put 2 and 2 together, and that's recovery. It's 99.x% survival. For $30 for a 10-day treatment cycle, coronavirus can be cured. There's a doctor out there that has lost 3 patients out of 7,000 that he's treated. Another individual that follows his protocol has 2,700 COVID patients, and he has lost 0 patients, and it costs them about $30 to treat these patients. A friend of mine just lost her mother because of COVID. I reached out to her and asked what the protocols that the doctors were using, and they were using remdesivir. What's the side effect of remdesivir? Renal failure. She posted on Facebook that her mother died because she went to renal failure. We got to start putting things together. We've got to start uniting as a community and realize that, yes, it's fearful because it's being pushed out to us. But one of the biggest fears that we have as a society is majority of the individuals out there who are afraid of COVID aren't really afraid of COVID. They're afraid that they're being lied to. Now, I understand that some people do die. There's comorbidities, etc. But it's frustrating that here we are again talking about COVID. My youngest son today told me, Dad, I couldn't breathe today because of his mask. And Mrs. Gould, I'm going to tell you right now that I told my sons, they have a hard time breathing in your classroom, go off to the side, be respectful. I told them to respect the 6-foot distance and pull their mask down and get to catch their breath. So if there's an issue with that, please call my cell phone. Okay. My oldest boy, a few weeks ago, looked at me. He's like, Dad, if we have freedoms, why am I forced to wear a mask at school? He's 8 years old. And that was one of the proudest dad moments I have. Because I bought both of my boys one of these books right here. The Constitution, and it tells us point blank exactly what rights are granted to us. And as for following the laws, the main legislation, the House of Representatives and the Senate has failed us as a state, plain and simple. There is no laws. It's executive orders, it's recommendations, it's mandates. The legislative branch has done nothing to curtail all of this stuff. And if any of the senators or representatives have an issue with what I said, please call me. I'll be more than happy to discuss this. But I'm frustrated that people don't see that requiring masks is actually unconstitutional. You can't stop life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We're shown that we're inhaling carbon monoxide. Well, how about the bacteria on these masks? I can pull up data on the bacteria of these masks from one school day. Liberty, I don't have the choice to say this. It's written right here that it's face masks are required. Where's my liberty to make my choice for myself? If the vaccine's working, you have the vaccines, then it doesn't matter if I wear a mask or not. If the mask works, you wear a mask, that's fine, that's your choice. And at first, I really wanted to educate people and show them the stuff, but people just aren't willing to listen. And that's fine, that's their prerogative. But if we came together and realized that us as individuals have the right to choose whether to get vaccinated or not, and whether to wear a mask or not. And that's the frustrating part, is people are giving away the rights and freedoms and liberties because Dr. Fauci, who's got more blood on his hands than Dr. Kevorkian does, is telling you that you have to wear a mask, 2 masks, get the Fauci-ouchie, here's a booster. Pfizer is going to get $10 billion, with a B, $billion per vaccine. Each shot is $10 billion in profits. Moderna was going bankrupt last fall. Multiple members of their boards are billionaires, with a B again. So I'm going to shut up now because I definitely overstepped my boundaries, and I apologize to anyone I may offend.
Thank you, Patrick.
So that's the recommendation, that we're following the CDC recommendations in order to keep kids in school. Otherwise, we would be looking at quarantining a much larger population, which would mean that students would be home, more students would be home, which would be impacting families who would not be able to work in a lot of instances. So I don't know how you want to proceed. This one's going to have to be a
Should we do 2 motions?
a weighted 2, why 2?
Oh, we haven't, I was thinking masks and pooled
That's
testing.
2 separate.
2 separate, yes.
But this, I know that we'll have weighted votes, so
Yep.
I'm prepared for that.
So we have a motion.
No, we don't have a motion,
I
do
thought
we?
No, I think Cullen has a question and you don't look right.
Just to be super clear, does this district have any say over who gets quarantined or not?
We identify who has to quarantine, yes,
And that's-
based upon the CDC guidelines.
Okay, but that's up to the district whether or not we quarantine somebody, or is that the state?
We follow the CDC guidelines to determine who has to quarantine. We don't just make that determination on our own. The nurses follow the guidelines to make that determination.
And does the district have any discretion in waiving that quarantine requirement?
No. No, they have to follow the rules and the protocols identified, and then they will notify families of who is supposed to quarantine. And then what families choose to do outside of school, we can't control that, of course. Nancy.
So then for clarification also, if we vote to continue wearing masks, what we're really doing is voting to continue to keep our children in school so that they don't have to continue to quarantine or start quarantining. Is that?
And yes, and so the district doesn't need to go remote. And yes,
If you choose as a board to not have a universal mask mandate, the concern based upon our experience is that we will need to start identifying close contacts that are within 6 feet versus just within 3 feet. And by doing that, we're not able to keep kids 6 feet apart in classrooms. We're doing our best to keep them 3 feet. We can't do 6 feet. So would we see the increase in the number of students who would have to quarantine if we had positive cases in the school? Absolutely.
other questions? Is there any?
One comment.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Pat and express some appreciation for speaking from the heart. It's a hard thing to do in public.
Well, like I said, I wasn't trying to piss anyone off. That's not why I'm here.
There it is.
Oh, gosh, who's not pissed off?
I'm waiting for you to throw that spare chair next to you.
Oh, I got you.
No, and Pat, I appreciate your candor, and we all are passionate and frustrated. And a lot of what you say, I agree with it. It's hard to know what to believe and what to trust.
And I completely understand that. There's a lot of times.
I know, I don't want to send you down the road again.
Yeah, no.
I'm not really
I'm
disappointed.
well past
I know,
everybody
you're down the
this
road.
that's
You're
for
on the
sure.
spiral, I know.
And
I know.
I understand the fear and stuff like that. And then I don't undermine that. I've seen the fear firsthand going on calls.
Mhm.
But there's an old saying, the truth will set you free. And I will tell you the anxiety that I felt the first time I did CPR with all that garb on, by a person that dropped, because who knows? I had to educate myself on what's really going on, and stuff that's actually out there, I can prove it. So we need to stop teaching our children fear, because that's the response that I feel that we're teaching our children. So
I appreciate your opinion. Thank you. Is there anyone that would like to make this motion?
Oh, I just have a comment or a question, I think, for Pat procedurally. So when we first did the meeting at the high school, right, we talked about if there was parent choice, mask mandate or not mask mandate. To be clear, all three of those would require quarantining and close contact and all the things we've talked about for the nursing staff, right? It would just be the proximity. We just talked about 3 feet versus 6. I wonder if you can comment, I don't know if you can, if there was parent choice, how that would even be managed. I just think of like what Jim just described. And teachers are kind of going to be the front line and have to deal with that. And have you even thought of that? You don't have to give a long answer, but just a consideration. And then obviously, if we said no mask mandate and folks still wanted to, they certainly can. Because you see that out in public all the time, you know, right? Like I only have one in my house who isn't vaccinated, my youngest one, so he usually does anyway. That's just the way we operate. That's fine. So that's just a question I have for you on those sort of other side of it.
If it were parent choice or student choice, then we would have to quarantine any close contact within 6 feet. We
Okay,
wouldn't be able to say, well, let me see if you were wearing a mask, and
Gotcha.
if you weren't wearing a mask.
it would be
It would
regardless.
be regardless. of
Okay.
6 feet.
Thank you.
can I ask something? Who says that we have to do that? What legislative piece says that we have to do that?
The SOP says if you have a universal mask mandate, it's 3 feet. If you don't, it's 6 feet. And then even if it didn't, the other piece is the manageability. it would not be manageable for a nurse to figure out in a classroom of 20 students, which ones were wearing a mask, which ones were not wearing a mask, which ones were close to within 3 feet, which ones were over 3 feet. It would just be a management nightmare.
Which is why we were remote last year, because we couldn't do 6 feet. We don't have the space. We don't have the staff. We don't have the capacity.
Why we went back we were in hybrid, right? Because we couldn't have all of the students in school every day and maintain that 6-foot distancing.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering who enforces that 6 feet? Like what governing body?
We enforce the SOP. So the
Which SOP is that? Where's
the
that?
CDC SOP, which I've shared with you guys in the past, that is what we follow. That's what the nurses follow.
Say something. And Pat, I do appreciate what you had to say, because it is hard to speak when you're passionate about something. But personally, I'm not afraid of the virus. I vote for the mask in schools because I'm an educator. And because for me, watching kids learn remotely, watching the parents have to manage that, especially children with disabilities, which is the population I teach, it had been and continues to be very difficult for those children and parents to manage. So for me, the lesser of the two evils per se, because I quite frankly don't believe what anybody has to say right now, is I vote because I want all children to have the opportunity to be in school as much as possible. And again, I just want to make it clear that I'm not afraid of this. I do it because I'm trying.
And I wasn't trying to accuse you.
No,
of
and
being
I know,
afraid.
but
And as for your vote, you are gonna look in the mirror at the end of the day, and you have to live with yourself with the vote that you choose.
Yep.
And I'm not gonna stand in between you and what you feel is right. So don't ever think because I have my thoughts and opinions.
no, and I don't want you to think that either. I just want to explain why I'm voting the way
And
I'm
there's no,
voting.
there's no explanation needed from you to me, because
Right.
you don't answer to me.
Right. I just want the
So-
children to be in school because that is where the majority of them learn the best. And as an educator in buildings all day long, to see what teachers and administrators and nurses are dealing with on a daily basis with these mask mandates, I can't even imagine if we didn't have it right now. Again, I want to have the day where they don't have to wear a mask. I do. I want that to come. I was hoping it would come sooner.
It's never gonna happen with you.
It's not gonna happen if you don't.
Again,
Again, I'm giving my opinion. I understand your
So they're gonna
opinion.
wear
And
it
I
at school, but they
appreciate,
can walk right outside and they don't need to wear it anywhere.
so we need
But you
to,
guys allow it to happen.
okay, so
in
I'm
school.
letting you know, as an educator, why I vote the way I vote. And I'm gonna leave my piece at that, and I respect your opinion. We probably have very similar opinions outside of me being an educator.
That's the trouble. You do.
Colin, you had your hand raised.
I was gonna, this is out of order, but is it possible to hear the pool testing update before we take a motion and a vote on the masking? Renewal?
Yes, the committee also discussed the pool testing and they are not recommending, it was unanimous not to recommend at this time that we do pool testing for a couple reasons. One, there's a real heavy upfront workload to it. And so given the current workload for the nurses, concerned about taking on that. And also the lead nurse and probably the other nurses as well, but the lead nurse spoke about this. She attends the, I believe they're monthly or weekly meetings with the DOE nurse person. And they talk about a lot of the bugs and the protocols and issues with some of the pool testing. And so her recommendation was that we really wait, give it a little more time so that they can work out some of those bugs and then consider it at that point. And hopefully in a little more time, they will also have additional data on the effectiveness of the pool testing. So the recommendation is to not institute pool testing for another month, and then we'll see about the future month.
Questions about that?
Just to add, Colin, with the bugs, is probably the wrong choice of words. The problem was the administration of the pool testing of the bureaucracy put in place isn't robust yet. So they're kind of blindly flailing in the dark and stuff like that, because it is a fairly onerous process up front, just even to do it for our school district, or just to do it for the high school, something like that. So trying to do it on a state level, there, you know, if someone needs, hey, I need more tests, well, we can get you 20, even though you need 200, because it's, the system isn't mature enough yet. So that's another reason why Kristen was against the pool testing. And again, just like Sarah, the middle school principal, just like I did last month before school even started, I said, what are the administrators, the people who are running the schools, you know, do you want this more on top of everything else you're doing? And all the principals said no. And that's why I said, okay, I'll vote against pool testing, because I'm not gonna be the one who has to get kids lined up every day and do paperwork and this, that, and the other thing. They've got 9 million other issues. So that the recommendation was keep the masks and no pool testing, same as it was a month ago. And again, we only have a month of the school year behind us, and they're still working through all the issues.
Yeah, just a comment, I have family out of state and they used it last year, and we're probably where you're talking about Maine is now. And now this year, ironically, the kids do 2 swabs every day. So then the pool does one thing, but then they can at least identify the one child in the close contact. So it's even like more chaotic in a way. So I'm like, okay, I've sort of made up my mind on that too. That's just too much. Like my kindergartner, first grader, his teacher's gonna have to do that. He's not gonna do it right. You know, that's just not, they don't need to be doing that. I agree.
More questions? Well, moving along, is there a motion to continue for one more month?
So moved.
Thank you, Colin.
Second.
Second by Matt Lillibridge. Any further questions or comments? I'm going to ask you to raise your hands and keep them up because we have to wait the votes. All those in favor of continuing the mask mandate for one more month?
Sorry. Takes a minute.
All in favor of keeping your hands up?
Patrick, is your hand up? Yours is a no, okay. Okay, and then I want to make a note that both Sophie and Gwen are also in support. So the way that works out is that they have 9 board members. 7 of them voted yes, with a tally of 7,684. And 2 voted against with a tally of 2,298. So the vote passes. Okay, and then on to pool testing.
I'll make a motion to not do pool testing again.
I'll second it.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor of no pool testing?
Okay, that's unanimous.
That's
Great,
unanimous.
thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I get a parting shot in?
A what?
Just a parting shot. I
Sure.
understand that there's actually some good hope on the horizon for a vaccine that's eligible for 5 and up.
Yes.
And I understand not everybody wants a vaccine, everybody certainly won't get it, but that sort of changes the matrix for me about if you feel like you need this, it's available, and there's a window there where people who just don't want it, and it becomes pretty clear that we can choose to move forward with or without masks for me at that point. So my hope is this is very different in a month.
My hope is exactly the same, is that it doesn't even have to wait a month, but that it can just be better. This is really hard. Yes, Jim?
Yeah, I can agree with Colin. My vote may change once the younger kids can get vaccinated. We can have it's an option at that point. It should be I want everything to be a parental decision. And if we can get the kids an opportunity to vaccinate as many as possible that agree to be vaccinated by their parents, then I'll really think twice about it. I'm really a little bit concerned about preschool, but we'll have to talk about that road when we get to it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's see. New business, MSBA resolutions. Jim,
Yeah, I'm trying to get there.
this is you.
So you threw me a curve.
Sorry. That was rude of me.
Yeah, it was. I can't tell you how rude. 'Cause
Samantha,
I
thank you
hope I
for
gets
coming.
confused easy here. Does everybody have the opportunity to look at the resolutions?
Yes.
Okay. They have been changed. Originally, there was a large batch of changes going into the general, I call them the bylaws, but I guess it was previous recommendations and proposals. Anyways, does anybody have a question on everything except, at least for my purposes, how you feel about everything except the there we go. Hang on, my computer is. Basically, it's the arbitration, everything but arbitration and right to strike. Does anybody have anything that is concerned about the changes prior to those two issues? Because I'm gonna have to vote on at the delegate convention, and I'm assuming that now the right to strike and the binding arbitration will also be within that general vote because it's now part of the, and it probably should have been all along because there was wording in there, deleting something, changing stuff, and then they asked you to vote on it again later. But so anybody have a comment or question about that I can take to the meeting for you?
I think, well, if I may.
Sure. Yes, please.
I feel like as we went through, I kind of checked all the boxes, like we do this already, we
Yes.
have a policy.
Yes.
So I was good that way. That's kind of how I read it.
Yes, a lot of this stuff we already have in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So it's not terribly new to us.
No,
We're pretty policy heavy in
Yeah.
this district, and there's a lot of districts, not every district adopts the policies as they
Right.
come, the suggested ones.
Mhm.
We do a pretty good job of making sure we're covered.
Okay, the one thing that I'm let me back, I'm trying to find my place here. And there was one, and the one thing that I do want to stress that I was quite impressed with, being on the dropout prevention committee, the multiple pathways to a graduation. And Jack, could you correct me if I'm wrong? If we, or if the legislature adopts this proposal or this recommendation from the School Board Association, that it will be possible for a student who enters in the 9th grade, for whatever reason, leaves, comes back and realizes they've made a very big mistake, and they get back into a program, either some kind of a program, whether it's the night school for adult education or whatever it may be, they can graduate at 6 years with a Gardner area high school diploma. Is that correct? It wouldn't be just a GED, like
So,
graduation equivalency. It would be an actual diploma.
so people can they can get a diploma through us as far as the high school. and
Right.
They can also get a diploma through adult ed program. So the adult ed program has both the high set and the diploma program. For anyone that's not with us, all the way up through until age, whatever.
Yeah,
100.
I could go back now at 72, go back and get my high school diploma if I needed one.
Yep.
But what I'm getting at is those that are within that 6 years of starting school, if they come back and go to night school, do they get a night school graduation certificate, or do they get an actual diploma from Gardner Area High School?
I would have to look and see,
But I think that's going to be an important issue, because a high school diploma carries more weight with an employer than does a GED or even a night school diploma.
So we do the high set now, and it does carry sort of a different weight, Jim. However, it's, yes, Jen.
The diploma that comes from the adult ed program can and should carry the same weight that our diploma from the high school does. The GED or the high set is a different way of doing it. They test through it. You want to call it clipping through the curriculum, and that they get tested for their content knowledge in pre-tests. And then based on those pre-tests, it determines whether they're likely to pass the regular test or not. If they're not likely to pass the regular test, then Josh would give them the education that they're targeted, that they need in order to likely pass that section of.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And our diploma, I'm certain it's the same diploma. They may not go through the high school graduation ceremony.
Yeah.
They may go through the adult ed graduation ceremony. But certainly we have individuals who receive a high school diploma through our adult ed
It's
program.
Gardner Area Regional High School.
Yes. it's our
Okay, that's all I
program.
wanted to make
Yes.
sure of, because that's what I think is important. And I know, and I come from an area where they have a GED. It's, you can go back, and it isn't the same thing as a diploma from a high school. It
Right.
says you finally made it through, you got the basics done. And sometimes they're not nearly as inclusive, most of the time, they're not as inclusive. I'm not talking about our program. I'm talking about other programs that I've been involved with, where they're not as inclusive, and the employers do not look at them as well as favorably.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak
And
to
that's
that.
just employers, and that's real life.
We have a lot of people who will choose to go with the high set versus the high school diploma because it's a lot more work and a lot longer amount of time that needs to be spent taking classes versus being able to focus just on the high set. But Mr. Kempton has high school teachers who have taught classes through the adult ed program at night. And so those students can take those same courses that they would be taking with us to be earning their high school diploma.
I'm not criticizing our program.
Oh, I didn't think
it's
you were.
great.
I'm just
I
explaining that.
just want to make sure that we are actually allowing them, that if that's the case, I don't see the reason for this particular.
I don't know if it's the same in every school district around the
Okay.
state, but that's.
If that, I think it's important that kids should be able to get a high school diploma. And
There are some schools, districts that don't have adult ed programs.
That's true.
yes, okay.
Right.
And then the other two issues that are within this general discussion here is, how does everybody feel about binding arbitration?
Does everyone understand what binding arbitration means?
Why don't you explain it to us?
So what binding arbitration, what that means is right now, the way it works is that the school board, you enter into negotiations with a bargaining party, okay, whether that be the teachers, the ed techs, whatever. And so you sit at the table with them, and if you get to a place of an impasse where you can't come to an agreement, the next step is to go to mediation. And you have a third party who will come in and try to mediate between the two groups. You then have, if you're unsuccessful through that portion, you then go to what's called fact finding. And so then you have another body, independent body, who will come in and they will help negotiate through your impasse. And they will present a finding about what they think the sides should do. If you are unable still, then the next step is arbitration. When you get to arbitration, right now, what the law says is that any of the language is binding. Okay, so if there's outstanding language that you can't agree on, you get an arbitrator, they will come up with language and it's binding. But what's not binding are your salaries and your health insurance, your benefits. that is not binding because that's a local decision. The school board understands what your local community can afford or not afford. So what's happening right now at the legislature is there is a push by the MEA to make arbitration binding. So if that happens, there's really no need to settle at the table. If there is a dispute, right?
Yeah.
You can take it all the way to arbitration and hope that the arbitrator, who is usually not from Maine, most times they're out of Massachusetts, that someone from Mass is gonna come here and they're gonna dictate to you, and you're going to have to pay whatever they feel is an appropriate salary and wage versus it being local. That's what that's talking about.
Thanks.
And that's an important thing not to have.
Yeah,
Okay.
agree.
On the scale of things not to have, that's one not to have.
I will be voting for this change unless somebody tells me they do not want us to do that. And I don't think there's anybody in this room that do you prefer binding arbitration?
No, I just want to say they're striking one clause, which couples both binding arbitration and right to strike. And personally, while I agree that I think agreeing to binding arbitration is probably not in the district's best interest, I do fundamentally believe in the right for groups to self-organize, to advocate for their rights. So if I were to put an opinion out, I would say,
You have no idea how hard it is for me to vote for these two issues as we're talking about right now. I'm the son of a teacher. I'm the nephew of a teacher. I have 3 cousins that are teachers, and I have 2 daughters that are teachers. So that's why I'm never on the negotiating team, who would be a good candidate. So, but I believe that as a board, we should vote against this. So, and I will support that, unless you tell me otherwise. And the same thing goes for the right to strike, which I have been in states that I've lived in states that have the right to strike. It's not a pretty thing because half the time, what will happen is that there will be a group of students who are not doing anything. They will show up on the picket line and it gets ugly. I don't want to see that. That part I have a problem with. So unless somebody tells me otherwise, that's how I think I'd like to vote.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Want to do a thumbs up for Jim?
Please do. Okay.
Thank you.
Next issue. These are 2 new revisions. And I think I had made it a little more succinct, but we're still going through, because I think part of this learning loss is basically what we're looking at. And through summer vacation and through the pandemic exposures. And I think that's all we need to talk about. But part of this resolution is basically should be down in the rationale, I think, but that's neither here nor there, because I believe we should address this strongly. I believe it's important when we go to like the dropout prevention committee. This is the thing we need to focus on for at least the next couple of years. I know we have other committees that do that, but we as a board, the whole board and all the committees should be doing as much as we can to support this. We've bought buildings, we've hired teachers, we've hired specialists. So I think we're addressing this as the very best possible way. They're recommending a student-centered approach to it, which I think we're already doing, frankly. But I think we should support it. I mean, if you can give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, I'd like to know on that. Okay. One more thing is, let's dropout prevention. What I really think we should be looking at. Same thing, we need to address that. They're asking for a 90% graduation rate. That's what their goal is. I've been exposed. I used to be a curriculum advisor for one of the high schools in California. Unfortunately, in that particular program, the dropout rate was just phenomenal. It was huge. And so, but I don't know what ours is from.
Chad, don't walk away, please.
What's our dropout
Yeah, your
rate?
timing's bad. What, do you know what is this year? High 80s, low 90s.
What our academic
Graduation rate.
graduation rate
I just don't remember.
For the past several years, it's been just over 90%.
That's fantastic. We do a good job, but I think this is a good thing that we should be doing. And so unless anybody disagrees with that, I will be voting for these changes.
Thumbs up,
And we have the 28th of this month, I think it's 28th, 26th.
28th and the 29th.
28th, yeah. And then that Saturday, I will be on my meeting with the delegates. I wish we were meeting in person. I think it's important to get the feel of the room, but maybe next year we'll see.
Hopefully next year.
And as a reminder, thank you, Jim, the state school board conference is the 28th and the 29th of October. It is virtual. And we need people to start signing up if you plan on attending. If you want to shoot me a note or let me know at the end of the meeting. And Sophie and Gwen, certainly that's going to be an option for a student to attend as well. So I just need you guys to let me know.
You got me signed up because I by this time I've usually received a packet from the
Oh, right.
Okay,
MSBA.
all right. No, she doesn't have anyone signed up yet. I will sign you up.
I think I'd like to go.
Okay,
I think you need to go.
yeah.
And I hope it's not remote next year.
I went last year, right? Is that the one I went to?
You did, you won all those
I
prizes.
won all kinds of cool
Yeah.
things.
It was
Yeah,
the year
there's all
before,
these-
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Do you want to go this year?
I think I can. I just want to double check my
Okay.
schedule just because
Alright.
occasionally there's a conflict. So
And-
I will let you know.
That would be great. And again,
Yeah.
you don't have to go both days. You can go
Yeah.
one day, or the other day. That's totally fine. Becky and I go.
Mhm.
We actually are free. Doesn't cost the district because of we have positions, kind of a oversight position, so we get to go free. So that's awesome.
Mhm.
So that kind of frees up money for anyone else on the board who wants to go.
Thank you, Jen, for doing this too.
I enjoy it. I really do.
It's 2 days of great conferences and free, well, kind of free legal advice. Pay to be there.
They do have some good programs, really do.
Great, yeah. Great programs.
Student conference.
Alrighty, yeah, we have a lot to cover. We have a lot to cover.
Stop day.
Oh, there you go.
B, plan for remote instruction, should it be necessary?
So as I mentioned earlier, we came close last Friday, thanks to Mr. Kempton and his staff for being incredibly creative in covering the classes so that we didn't have to go remote, but we came close. And so we thought it might be important for us to communicate with you, for members of the public who are watching. Just a reminder what our remote plan is, should we find that we're in that situation. So Angela, would you share our plan, please?
Yes.
Would you do it from the podium, please?
Yes. Okay. On the district website, there is a link called curriculum in MSAD11, and on that website, there's a tab called Red Learning Model, which I will change to Remote Learning Model, because that will make more sense this year for families than Red. So that will be changing. It hasn't changed yet, but it will tonight. And in the Remote Learning Model, it just clarifies that we have 2 learning scenarios this year. Last year, we had 3 because we had the hybrid option. So this year we have 2. We have full in-person instruction. That's what we're in now. And we have remote learning. Last year we had a virtual academy. This year we do not. So if an individual is quarantined, a class is quarantined, or a school needs to go remote for a variety of reasons, information will be provided certainly through the building administrator to the families, but is also available for preview on this website. And some of our families have already experienced this. So what will happen depends on the age of the child. If the child is in pre-K through 2nd grade, the teacher will provide some learning materials, hard copy, or we call them packets sometimes, and those will be made available to the to the child for the duration of the quarantined experience. And if the child is well enough to attend to that, we ask that they do, and that's part of their continuous learning. And in most cases, it'll be practice of something like they've learned, or introduction of new material that they feel they can manage at home. And then we ask that those materials return when the child returns to school. In some cases, teachers will provide supplemental supports through our online platform called Seesaw. That is not mandatory. It may not happen universally, and it may also depend on what seems to work best for the teacher and or the families. We're trying to be responsive to the varying needs that we have going on. So it's optional. At the grades 3 through 5 level, students have access to an online platform also called Seesaw in grade 3 and Google Classroom in grade 4-5. And we are asking that families, when possible, and if the student is well enough, to attend virtually the ELA and the math classes. If it's one child quarantined as opposed to an entire class, those are the classes we would ask for participation. That's clarified in this document. And under extenuating circumstances, there may be some modifications made, because this is, again, we're trying to understand what can we all do to ensure the student is part of the learning community and continuing to learn. That's our primary objective. So there sometimes will be conversations depending on the student's needs, learning plans, how we'll be able to move forward with ELA and math. If an entire class in grade 3 through 5 is quarantined, they will use, or a school, they will use what we call the remote learning plan or the red learning plan. We instituted the model that we like the best, that families seem the most responsive to as well, in January of 2021. So we're just carrying that forward. Every so often there might be a slight accommodation made, but that was certainly communicated at the classroom level, the building level. And then in grades 6 through 12, we ask that any student or class or school, when moving remote, follows the daily bell schedule. So what they're doing in school is what they'd be doing outside of school. They'll just follow the same schedule, and they'll log in either synchronously or fully remote, depending on how many people are virtual, and follow their course for the day. And they will use Google Classroom for their material organizational needs, and Google Meet for the live instruction or the live engagement, like we did last year. So we tried to keep as many things consistent as possible, because we know how hard it is to learn new things under these stressful circumstances. Am I missing anything? Okay. That is our plan.
Can you step me through again where it is?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's a little bit tricky, but anytime this happens, I'm sure the building and the teacher will work really hard to be proactive in making sure the plan is communicated. But if you go to www.msad11.org and you click at the top under schools, it should be under any schools, but we'll just go to central office because that's easiest. We're sitting in central office right now.
Yep.
And then hit explore. And that little black box comes up on the right.
Yep.
And you see curriculum in MSAD11.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
And then there's a bunch of information there. And again, it says on the top tab on the right, it says red learning, and I'll change that tonight to remote learning. Because I just think it'll be more accessible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And you were able to get that with those?
I was, yep. It's there.
Any other questions about remote learning? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
No problem.
Yes. Next on the agenda is the reason we're all here tonight,
Yes.
is we get to welcome Sophie as our new student board representative.
So yes, you have a new face at the table. It's like, who is that person? So Becky, Gwen, and I interviewed 2 applicants for this position, both very qualified. And we interviewed on Monday, so Sophie hasn't had a lot of turnaround time, I know I would be here tonight, but Sophie, and you prefer Sophie over Sophia?
Yes.
Okay. She was selected due to her collaborative, cooperative nature, her inquisitiveness, and her clear ability to work with others and to engage in the conversation with her peers. So we're really excited to have you join our team. And I don't know if Gwen or Becky, as part of that interview committee, if you want to say anything else.
Very excited to have you. Very.
I'm very excited to have you as well. Known you since you were just this big, and it's just so nice to watch you grow. And I'm familiar with your curious nature, and I hope that you will find us to be, first of all, thank you for coming on in such a controversial period of time. That shows a certain form of bravery, and I appreciate that. And I hope that you'll reach out to each of us if you need to, and that we are welcoming and as friendly as we need to be. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. We're just glad you're here.
And now that we're back in person, something that we used to do is I used to meet on a monthly basis with the student reps, if you wanted such a meeting, so that we could just chat about things and we could talk about the future board meeting. Let me know. I'm happy to do that. We can meet at the high school at a time that works for both of you. And it's great, just a great way to sit and kind of talk about school board business outside of such a formal process. Okay? So welcome.
Thank you, I'm happy to be here.
Is there anything you'd like to tell us about yourself?
I don't know.
Right, right. This is Sophie's mom. So glad she's here too.
So we need a motion.
Would anyone like to move? Jim would like to move.
I'll second that.
And
I
Nicole
would
will
like
second.
to move that we accept Sophie as our new student member of the school board, and welcome.
Thank you.
And it would be for a 2-year. So she would be here 2001 to 2023 would be your term. Okay.
I second Jim's motion.
Excellent. Any questions or comments or anything? All those in favor? Great, it's unanimous. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Okey-doke. Annual approval of the emergency crisis plan.
So for those of you who've been here a while, I don't know that we did this last year. We had a few other things going on at the
We're
time.
in a crisis.
Right.
It's like,
We were living the plan.
yeah, it's fine.
But if you recall, we have, of course, every school district in the state has to have a comprehensive crisis emergency plan. And that requires that it be presented to the school board on an annual basis. Given the confidential nature of some of the information, it is not a document that I can just widely send out to all of you. So historically, what we've done is we've had a school board member come into the boardroom and into the central office, and they've gone through it step by step, just to take a look and make sure that there's nothing missing, nothing glaring, and to give us some feedback. So this year, Cullen graciously agreed to do that, and he was in earlier this week and went through it step by step. So Cullen, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to share or.
Just to follow, just to report that it is in good order and following best practice as recommended. I have one recommendation to Pat that just to be sure that each school reviews it each year, whether or not they update it. And that was about it.
Well, you also made another suggestion.
Oh, gosh. Well, I didn't want to weigh
Which
too heavily on it, but when opportunity arises, there's a new category of crisis management that isn't folded into the typical response manual, which is data breach is the big one, because like any large institution, privileged records are mostly in the cloud or online now. So that's an area to be aware of. And also with more and more students engaging in online and virtual software packages, there's a new category of, it's not a new category of crime. There's a new opportunity for crisis, just to name it, illicit or illegal material being transmitted between minors and or other personnel over the internet. You end up with like statutory crime right off the bat. So just two areas to look at, like how to mitigate those crises and how to respond to it if it does happen, would be a nice inclusion.
And the other thing I mentioned to Cullen is the legislature this past session also approved a requirement where all school districts have to incorporate into their plan a health and safety section, which makes sense, of course, because of the pandemic. And that we're required to have school nurses, physicians, and public health staff must be included in the making of the plan. So as a reminder, our plan was developed comprehensively with the Kennebec Emergency Management. They were at the table, the local law enforcement was at the table, local, I think the Gardner Fire Chief was at the
It was
table.
actually, I was the one that.
You were the
there,
one at it?
yes.
Okay, thank you, thank you, Patrick. That was so long ago. I
That
don't
was a long
remember.
time
I don't
ago.
remember.
I do have a couple points
So.
that I'll talk to you about after the meeting for that
Okay.
plan.
Okay,
So-
all right. So we do know that some work needs to be done moving forward this year on that plan, but at this point, it's ready for the initial approval.
I'll just say that I'm happy to share on the data side. I live in that every day, and it's true. You can sort of farm it out as much as you can, but you still gotta let people know what to do or who to call, and for Terry, another phone call probably. But we can certainly offer that.
A lot of things have changed since we wrote that. I think it's what, 9 years ago that we sat down and did that?
Wow.
I don't remember, but 2 or 3 years ago, I had to send it once again to the Kennebec Emergency Management. It's the new person who replaced Art True.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he reviewed it and just to make sure that we were in good shape, and he thought we were
It was
in
pretty
great
solid
shape.
back then.
Yeah.
The computer stuff is a new issue that we're facing, so.
Yep.
It's not going away.
no.
So,
All right, a motion then to approve for this year.
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Patrick, second from Cullen. Questions, comments? All those in favor? Great, motion carries. Great, thank you. Let's see, school board meetings, technical support stipend.
okay, so at the last policy committee meeting, one of the items that we discussed was the new technology in this room. And what does that mean in terms of videotaping and live streaming board meetings? Do we want to just live stream regular board meetings or board workshops? Or do we also want to live stream committee meetings, policy, curriculum, and finance? Those would be your 3 standing committees. And the policy committee believed that given the technology that we have, because the work happens in committees, that's where the healthy conversations occur. It felt very strongly that we should be live streaming those meetings as well as regular board meetings. As a result, in order to do that, Ms. Terry, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, or if not her, someone else from her department, it's going to be necessary for them to now be here videotaping and live streaming all of those meetings, which is what they did last year. And last year, Terry was there most of the time and she did not receive any compensation. But feeling like that's way above and beyond what she is employed to do. So we agreed that a stipend was in order and that I would bring a stipend tonight versus waiting for a finance meeting because they were just, we want to get a move on here. So Terry and I met, we talked about the number of hours over the entire year, and we came up with approximately 135 hours that we anticipate between all of the committees, the fact that she sits here an hour, 30 minutes before, looking at having to do some work afterwards to make sure that it's put up on YouTube, it's made available, et cetera. And looking at the same rate that we use for our teachers who work outside of the workday for curriculum work, which is roughly $38 an hour. we put those two together and our proposed stipend is $5,000. So, and Terry feels that that's reasonable.
Is this just from going forward, or were we talking also about last year?
This is just moving forward.
Okay. I'd like to make the motion that we do it as recommended.
I'm sorry, who was that second? Oh, thank you.
Questions, comments? Colin?
Just one. See, this is the kind of practice that we probably would never walk back from. So is the intent to make that part of the ongoing annual budget in subsequent budget years? Okay.
Unless suddenly all the equipment becomes self-monitoring.
Yeah, and it's not right now. It is not.
We are not
AI grade.
We should not be trusted to self-monitor in any way. All right then, all those in favor? Excellent, thank you. And Terry, thank you so much for doing it last year uncompensated and thank
We
you.
all worked an awful lot of extra hours uncompensated last year.
Yes. Well, thank you, I appreciate it. We appreciate it. All righty, substitute pay.
All right, so last year, if you would recall, last year we came to you and asked for modification to the amount that we were paying substitutes for COVID. That we were trying to maintain our staffing levels, and in order to do that, really felt like we had to increase our pay. We are finding now, also with COVID, that we are underpaying pretty significantly our subs based on what our neighbors are paying. And so if a sub receives a call from two districts and one is literally paying $60 a day more than we're paying, we're losing out. So our current rate has been $90 a day. So what I am proposing for the remainder of this year, and to use COVID federal money for this, and then we'll have to really sit down and think about this moving forward, because our workforce issue isn't, I don't know that there's going to be an immediate fix at the end of the school year. So what we're proposing is that we would pay an uncertified substitute $120 a day. A certified sub would be $150 a day. Presently, we're already paying 180 days for an uncertified long-term sub, meaning they would be here for 10 days or more in a classroom.
$180 a day?
A day, right,
Okay,
right.
you said 180 days.
Oh, sorry,
$180
$180 a day for a long-term sub. And a long-term sub, they're considered a long-term sub if they're here for 10 consecutive days or more. And then a per diem, which would be on step one of a teacher's contract, for a certified long-term sub, which again is past practice. That's what we've been doing. And so that's what we're recommending. And I know that that's in line with some neighboring schools. So.
Motion?
Make the motion.
Thank you, Nancy. Second? Matthew Lillibridge? Questions, comments? All those in favor?
Great, thank you. And this will go into effect then on Tuesday, okay?
All right, creation of a new English language learner teacher.
Okay, Alicia is here to present the situation that we have right now. We currently employ a ELL teacher and an ELL ed tech. And we have increased our population this year. And so it has really shifted our need. So what she's going to present to you, I would make that recommendation for this year only. And we can reevaluate during the budget process as we get closer to the end of the school year to see what future years' needs are.
Okay, so I'm proposing an additional ELL teacher for this year, just given the number of unanticipated move-ins we had a week prior to school starting. We had 4 students move in, 2 that had significant needs. So just some background information. Under the civil rights law, ELL ed techs or tutors or other educators are not able to provide legally core instruction for ELL services. So this means right now that the majority of our 14 ELL students we have in district need to be seen by our ELL teacher every single day. So our ELL ed tech is fabulous, but she's only able to provide supplemental instruction, which goes above and beyond what the ELL teacher provides. So for example, the ELL ed tech can push into content areas, provide homework help during study hall or before or after school, if we were to pay her to do so, and or assist students in developing skills in their primary home language. So currently, students who are at a proficiency level of one or two, according to the WIDA testing, which make up the vast majority of our ELL students, they're all at level 1 or 2, which is emerging. They're just learning the English language. They should be receiving at least 1 or 2 periods every single day of ELL instruction. And students who are at proficiency level above 2 should be receiving at least 1 period a day of ELL instruction. So currently, because our 1 ELL teacher needs to cover 14 students across the district, the schedule is unmanageable and students are not receiving near as much as they should be receiving for ELL services. So with this also, we have the ELL ed tech and the ELL teacher losing even more valuable seat time because they are driving to all schools during the day. So our current ELL ed tech is fabulous, and she's worked hard to take courses to be certified under the emergency certification for ELL. So I'm proposing to take our current ELL ed tech and make her a teacher. So that way we would have 2 ELL teachers in the district. They could then split up the 6 buildings. Each would cover 3 buildings, and they wouldn't need to travel back and forth to make sure that the teacher is seeing all students, because they would divide up the caseload. They would be providing more instruction because they wouldn't be traveling, and they would also get common planning time together. This is something that they don't really get now, and by law, the ELL teacher is required to supervise any planning done by the ELL ed tech, and that's not happening. So unfortunately, because this was not anticipated, we did not build in, I did not build in any money into the budget to cover this. I've been working with Andrea, she is out today, just to see where we could pull the extra funds from. I'm not sure where that's going to come from, but this is still my proposal for the remainder of this year.
You feel confident that Andrea can find the money for the remainder of the year?
You know, I support this because we have to be providing the
No, I
education
don't-
to the
right,
students.
right, I don't
Currently,
disagree.
if we were to give the students what they needed to be receiving, that's 10 hours a day. And there isn't even 10 hours a day. So if we're able to get the 2 teachers, we can certainly provide that.
Yeah, we've had some unanticipated expenses, and you know, that's it. Keep in mind that when we build we build our budget, we build for 26 pays under the new salary. Right, yet we're paying for 5 pays on the old salary and 21 pays on the new salary. So there is a little bit of a buffer, but we also have had individuals go from single coverage to 2-person coverage or to family coverage. And that's where some of our biggest hits come in terms of the budget impact, when those changes are made if we haven't budgeted. So there was a cushion. I don't know where that cushion stands now, but we do have in the budget your, what's that account? Sorry, it's late. I'm having a blank. That emergency contingency account. We have that a contingency account. Sorry, I just couldn't. It's late. So we do have that we build in, and we build that in for a purpose because there are situations such as this that surface, but
Okay,
I have a stupid question.
there are none.
This one probably is. Is ELL the new term for ESL? What used to be?
Yeah, it's English language learners.
that while we were
Okay. I
Sorry.
wanted to listen, so.
Versus
It's
English as a
acronym.
second language,
Right.
it's now English language learners.
Happy to glad.
See, it's not a dumb question at all.
Now, what's the approximate differential between the tech salary and the?
For the year, the difference is going to be around a little bit over $16,000.
Yes, Jim.
We're basically shuffling people moving in to become a teacher, which I think we absolutely need. And I hate to bring this up, but don't we need an ed tech also, at least one?
We definitely need ed techs in other areas, but we don't need another ed tech in ELL. If this ed tech becomes the teacher,
Okay,
we don't need a third person.
okay, I
You
just
would
don't
be
like
all-
shuffling people
Yes.
to meet laws. And if we shortchange anybody, I just don't want that group of students being shortchanged.
They definitely will not be
Okay.
shortchanged. They are right now. We've always been able to manage with, well, initially we were able to manage with one teacher. And then we had a couple other families move in that required services, so we could bring on an ed tech. But because now there are 14 students and they are spread in every building, it's really hard to go, from West Gardner to Pittston and then over to the high school, just to make sure that we're giving them what they need.
So assuming that none of them move away next year, we will still need to fund for the teacher next year as
Well,
well.
that's what Pat said,
It's-
maybe not. We
We'll
don't
have to
know.
revisit that. I mean, it is definitely possible, but what Alicia is saying is that with the students that we have, many of the young students, they're right now classified as emerging. So their skill level is what's called a level 1 or 2. And the DOE is recommending that they have instruction on a daily basis and how much instruction they're having on a daily basis. So there is the potential that with the extra attention this year, that they will move beyond level 1, level 2, and once they get up to level 3, they're not going to need the same level of support that they need now. So we'll just kind of have to assess it as the year goes along.
Yeah, and the goal this year is to get the students that are on a level 3 to level 4, and then they can be on monitor. So they wouldn't require that direct service, they would just require check-ins. We also have students that could potentially be graduating this year, so we may not have the need next year for an additional teacher, and then it would go back to a teacher and an ed tech.
Let's make a motion that we second English language learner teacher.
Okey dokey. Motion by Veronica, second. Second by Alyssa. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you, Alicia. Board chair, I don't have a report. Superintendent.
And I'm sorry to tell you, I have an extensive report. So, sorry.
It was all part of the plan.
Yeah, it was part of the plan. Okay, so the staff and student vaccination rates, we've already talked about that, right? I've already shared that information with you. Last month, we discussed, just briefly, I gave you an update on the start of school and how things were going, but it was only a couple days in. So I thought it might be helpful just to fill you in a little bit more with what's happening. Specifically, I wrote down TikTok devious lick challenge. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of that. Yeah, it's nuts. And so
Yes, it's
that
expensive.
basically, it's expensive. And so basically what has happened in that particular case is that students go into the bathrooms and they are taking like the soap dispensers off the walls, they're throwing them in the toilet, they are damaging the automatic toilet flushers. They are damaging the water to the sinks in an effort to flood the bathrooms. That's happening, it's happened at the middle school, it's been far more extensive at the high school. And it's my understanding that there is a monthly challenge. And so this month, it's not that anymore. This month, it's slap a teacher. And that you're supposed to be slapping a teacher on their rear end. So that has taken a lot of time from the administration. It's involved our SROs. I know at the middle school, Sarah couldn't be here tonight, but Sarah worked collaboratively with the SRO, with Officer Quintana, and actually held an assembly.
Yep.
And talked about it and talked about some of the other things that were going on, finding that students haven't been, many of them, in a structured environment for 18 months. And so they're coming to school and needing to relearn certain rules. Not saying no to teachers, is part of that. But just trying to figure out, once again, what those protocols were. So she has indicated to me, Sarah has indicated to me, that ever since she had that assembly, they've had no issues. That has completely resolved the issues, and it's been much, much better. Once students really understand that it's a crime to be damaging school property, and they could receive, they could be arrested for that. They could be charged with that, and certainly they would have to reimburse the school district for the cost of the damage to the school. Jim?
I think I've heard about this, but aren't they videotaping themselves and posting it on the internet as they're doing this?
Right. Yes.
And are we?
Able to get a
Well,
copy of that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Mr. Kempton has spent many, many hours this past month working on that. I don't know if you can respond.
Most of the time, it's not self-incriminating, they show your hands grabbing something and put it in the backpack. There are others that have, but it took me a week to gather some video of another situation because we're not surfing the airwaves, nor do I have time or interest to search TikToks and every other electronic device that is out there. So when we get a report that there's damage, we look at the video, we interview kids, we search backpacks, and we've certainly made it known that if somebody is caught doing that, then we will pursue charges and obviously school discipline. So yeah, it seems to have subsided since the end of the month. And no, we haven't had anybody get slapped yet.
If we hear of anybody getting slapped, I would expect to expel them.
Well, and it just connected a dot for me because my daughter was just telling me that a friend was doing that. So now that makes sense. Like, I was like, well, why is that happening?
I don't like damage, but if they strike
Yeah.
a teacher, that's a done deal.
Or another student, quite frankly, Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure you were aware that that is currently something that our administration and our staff have been addressing. I know our elementary administrators, our elementary staff, they're rocking and rolling in those buildings as well. As a reminder, we're still short staff. We still have some vacancies and some ed tech positions, trying to fill those. I know we just filled one yesterday. And we're continuing to interview and try to get people as quickly as we can, but we're just not seeing the applications aren't flowing in like they have in the past. So I think everyone's really looking forward to tomorrow, having a little bit of a change of pace and having a 3-day weekend. I don't know if any of the elementary administrators, do you have anything that you want to share? Just, it's been busy. they've certainly had some kids that are rocking and rolling, and with having some vacant ed tech positions, it has fallen to administrators and staff. We have administrators providing accommodations, administrators who are daily out of their classroom trying to support students. So it's a lot of work right now, and everyone's getting pretty tired. Jim?
That's not just our district and not just
Correct.
Maine. I have a son-in-law in California, the superintendent and much of the staff, and I'm talking about a superintendent of the county, 200,000 students. They are out subbing in elementary schools. So, and it's
a
Yeah,
lot.
I haven't done that. I have offered. I have said, I don't know, there were a couple, it was like, if you need me over there, let me know. I will be there, and if it means covering your office. So, you know, whatever it is. So you're right, all of us, it's hands-on, and if the need is there, I know any administrator here would do whatever was necessary to support their colleagues. So. Okay, so there's that. Snow days, I just wanted to make sure that we just had a brief conversation about snow days, because they will be here before you know it, right? So administratively, we've discussed snow days. I've discussed it with the Teachers Association as well. And our plan is to treat snow days as a snow day. Last year, I tried to do a remote day, and it was really tough for teachers who have children at home, especially those with young children. And so if their young children are having a snow day, yet they still have to work and provide instruction, that's incredibly difficult. Also, we have some staff members who do not have excellent internet connection at home. And so we don't want them to drive in bad weather to the schools to access that internet. So what we talked about is having a snow day. However, if we get to where we're looking at 4 or 5 snow days, and we're looking at having to make up days, then we think we should revisit this and see if we can be creative with some remote days. We get to define, you get to define what a remote day really looks like, okay? It doesn't have to be exactly what Angela just described on a snow day. It could be modified, it could look different so that we could make it work, okay? Let's see, and ultimately, as a reminder, we must be able to provide instruction to all students. So whatever it is that you do, it has to be for all students, and we must be able to make lunch available. Now, there's a waiver currently that will allow us to distribute food to students if we're having a remote day on a day other than the snow day. So we can distribute it the day before, 2 days before. In any other year, when that waiver is not in place, we cannot call it a remote day unless we're able to distribute food on the same day of the remote day. Okay, so if it's a snow day, are you really gonna have your buses out delivering food? Are you gonna have families driving in to pick? No.
One of those funny, ridiculous.
So in the
things.
future,
Yikes.
that may prevent us from ever being able to have a true remote day. Okay, so there's that. Wanted to update you on the modular units. And actually, Christina and Katie are prepared to give you an update on each of their units. So I'm not sure, Christina, you want to begin first?
Lucky modular recipients.
I don't really want to. So it's been busy over at Pittsburgh Randolph Consolidated. So we've got our 3 units. They're in place now. The neighbors across the way and all the staff have been fantastic and flexible and adaptable as they park in different places and park across the street. And, you know, as these things were brought in, the units are beautiful. They're large classrooms, you know, they're modern, they're nice. Gabe has done a wonderful job, like really trying to push and get the contractors in there to do all the work. Terry and her team have done a great job. We were really hoping to move tomorrow, but we're not there. The heating pipes are not installed yet and you can't move without heat, and the fire alarms still need to be connected as well. So we're not able to move tomorrow, so that's kind of a disappointment, but we're getting really close. So I'm actually gonna meet with Pat and Katie, and we're gonna talk about some possibilities for when we can move, now that we missed this workshop day opportunity, but they're great units. I know we'll get there, but I just have to say kudos to the staff because they've been teaching with boxes and, you know, not their regular setup that they'd like to have, so.
Yeah, and we may have to talk about being a little creative and how do we make that work? Given that we have student days, and we have teachers that need to move entire classrooms, and how do we accomplish that? We can't expect that they're gonna come in on a Saturday and make that happen, so we will discuss it. But there is a possibility that I will need to come back to you with a recommendation on maybe a little bit of a calendar tweak to allow that to happen for staff in those two buildings. Okay, Jim?
You're basically talking about moving it, physically moving desks and chairs, and why don't we hire a mover?
Well, we can do that internally. Our custodians can do that. But once the boxes are in the classroom, I need staff to have time to be able to unload their boxes, set up their classroom and that type of thing.
How come they don't come with heating pipes?
They don't come with what? They have to run it outside, like the propane lines for the heat. They have to run those.
It's piped on the inside, it's the outside.
Yeah, the inside stuff, the water and sewer is all hooked up already,
Okay.
most of the electricity is hooked up already. The heating pipes, I know, I'll come back. The heating pipes need to be hooked up for the propane.
I see.
And like I said, the fire alarm piece needs to be finished. A lot of it is done, but just, we need to have fire alarms, we need to have heat.
Sure, yes.
If it's not a burden, could you grab a few photos sometimes and just send them all?
Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
That'd be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are nice units. The other ones were, just as a
And
parent who was
these classrooms are
skeptical.
even larger.
Yeah, they're very nice.
Papers. That's so great. Everybody's gonna want one.
Yep.
That is happening. That's happening.
And I will say what's really interesting for those who have seen the Pittston Randolph, those classrooms, it's 4 classrooms, right? And we ordered the same thing for Helen Thompson. I haven't had a chance to look at it. I'm told they're entirely different.
Totally different.
Totally different.
Surprise, but it's here and it's all together. It is huge. There are 4 classrooms. As you already know, we'll put 4th and 5th grade classes out into those classrooms. And really now, the staff have had a chance to tour. It's still in pretty rough shape, but it's coming together rather quickly, not as quickly as we'd like. But yeah, people are like, well, if you change your mind, you know. Okay. So 4 big classrooms, 2 office spaces, a kitchenette area, a staff, what we'll designate as an adult bathroom, 2 group bathrooms, and, like a room without windows that is, we'll put some of the technology equipment, photocopier, some storage, because unlike the classrooms inside the buildings that have counters and cupboards and things, none of that is out in the modular. So it's looking good. Today we had McFarland Electrical on site. So that is happening currently. We had Seacoast on site today, Seacoast Security. Augusta Fuel needs to come in next. They're actually supposed to wrap some pieces up. See, we really have stopped talking timelines because we're just trying to handle this gracefully and without disruption for the kids. But they are supposed to wrap things up at Pittston Randolph Consolidated Monday and head over to HT. So we're hoping for that to happen. And again, like Christina said, the staff is handling this beautifully. The kids throughout the whole school, all grade levels cannot wait to take a tour. So that has to happen and we can send pictures really, but the insiders must see the space. They can't wait to get inside. We really need the ramp and the steps to be constructed before we can safely do that. Otherwise, it's pretty safe inside. But staff, they don't have their things, it's boxed up. I mean, for the sake of the kids, it's really seamless, but daily staff are sending emails like, does anybody have a copy of this book? I know mine is in a box in the gym. So kudos again to the staff and the multiple staff members who are displaced because we're using the library and for 4 different purposes and, you know, handling it with grace.
Thank you. The ARP and ESSER 3 application, I thought I submitted that back in September 17th. It's complicated. It's not always easy to maneuver, and I guess I didn't hit the right button. So that has delayed the approval process and put us lower in the queue, which is unfortunate. It is now done, but I know that Christina and Katie are desperate for some of the supplies, so they're in that grant, and we just can't order them until we receive that approval, just to make sure indeed we do meet the criteria. So I apologize for that. It's complicated, but still. LD 993, I've spoken to you before about that. That's the COVID sick days that have to be restored. I just wanted you to be aware that to date, that we have had to reinstate back to January 1st, 126.75 days to staff, totaling $25,773.71. And again, this law goes into effect. This law, this ends on October 18th. However, we have been made aware that it was not the intent of the people who initially wrote the law for it to end on October 18th. It was their intent for every single person to have access to 15 days at taxpayer expense. And so I think that this next legislative session, there are a couple bills going in from what I hear to provide clarity around their intent. So we'll see what happens. There is the chance that this cost will increase. Student vaccination clinic.
Matt.
Oh,
Is the
sorry.
state giving the district the money?
No,
So we just have to find it.
yes.
Out of a budget that's already been passed.
Yeah.
Student vaccination clinics, we have one set up at the middle school and the high school for October 22nd, and the follow-up would be November 19th. I too have heard that by the end of the month, there is the possibility that there will be vaccinations that will be approved for students or children ages 5 through 12. And so I know in at least one school district, the local hospital has already reached out and scheduled vaccination clinics for November. I'm not sure that I'm ready to do that. But as soon as we receive approval, we certainly will be in contact with the pharmacy that we are working with to make sure that we have vaccinations here as well for any interested parent.
When do you actually think you think it will be available next week, or is this just you expect the announcement next week?
I heard that it's being discussed the end of the month. So discuss meaning, with FDA and that sort of thing. The other thing that I don't have on, that I just wanted to update you very briefly, administration and I met today and we talked about facility use. Basically we've decided in terms of facility use for the public, our elementary schools are using the gyms. You've already heard Katie, that's where storage is. For a lot of the supplies and materials for the modular units. Also, many of them have to use that space for lunches so that we're spreading kids out in order to meet the 6-foot requirements. So we are not looking to allow outside organizations to be using the elementary schools at all, at least for the time being. And then at the middle school and the high school, looking at weekends only. And it would be only for community athletic teams or that we would need it. So, the youth groups, so that there would be space for youth basketball or something to be able to use it on a Saturday or Sunday. I do need to run that by Gabe just to make sure that we do have enough custodians to cover for cleaning so that everything is ready on a Monday when students return to school. But we felt like it's safe on a weekend when students are not in session. But the expectation is the mask mandate is in effect. The mask mandate is in effect. And as long as it is, they will need to wear a mask while they're using our facilities. The other thing, I included in your folder a multi-page document that says highlights of school-related enacted bills. You remember back in August, I provided to you a detail of some of the new laws that were impacting education. I've since received an update from your attorneys, Drummond and Woodson, and they've provided greater detail, and that there were a couple items that I had missed, a couple bills. A couple of these, the change is so significant. I'm certain I put it in there, right in the front.
I'll find it. It's okay. You're good.
No, no, good.
Oh, there we go.
It's like, I'm certain I gave it to you. So some of the changes are so significant. I feel like it is important for you to understand the impact these laws are going to now have on your staff and on your administration. So the first one is the new restraint and seclusion law. We've already had a restraint and seclusion law in the past. That is not new. However, the language has been modified. It's been modified that it now says that the restraint can only occur if there is imminent danger of physical injury to the individual or to other persons, okay? So if there's not imminent danger to a person, then you're not supposed to restrain them. So if we have a student who is in a classroom throwing things, damaging the walls, damaging stuff, but they're not really physically harming anyone, then we can't restrain them. If we have a student who is attempting to bolt out of a classroom, and we're not fearful that they're going to bolt out of the school, we can't stand in the doorway to prevent them from leaving, because that could be considered a restraint. Students can have to voluntarily do things. If we want to escort a student down the hallway to go to the principal's office, that student has to go voluntarily. If you put your hand on their back and they're like this and they don't want your hand there, that's involuntary and you can't do it. If you have a teacher who is putting their hand over another student's hand, trying to help them write, and the student doesn't want your hand there, that could be considered a restraint because it was not voluntary. There's also seclusion. And seclusion is the involuntary isolation or confinement of a student alone in a room, or clearly defined area from which a student does not feel free, doesn't feel free. Okay, so we're now trying to interpret how a student feels, or they're physically denied exit. So if we have a student who goes to the principal's office because whatever, there was a reason they got in trouble, they were sent to the principal's office, and the principal leaves their office to go speak to a secretary, right? There's someone right there outside of the office, but there's no one in the office. And if the student feels that they do not have the right to be able to leave that office, that is now considered a seclusion. That student has been secluded. So what that is going to entail for our administration, and you see them shaking their head, our lawyers are shaking their head. People can't believe this language, the amount of work it's going to entail now for our administrators with the amount of paperwork that they're going to have to complete. It means that every time a student is secluded or there is a restraint, there is paperwork that is going to have to be filled out. And all of that information will have to be reported to the Department of Education. It is not uncommon for us to have a student, an elementary student, who might go out to the playground and refuse to come in. You can't restrain the student who refuses to come in if they're just sitting on the playground. You now are going to have a staff member sit there with the student. We've already said we're shorthanded. We don't have enough staff as it is. And that person is going to have to sit out there and wait and try to control and convince the student to come in. Or you call the parents, of course, and try to get the parents. But this is so significant. I really wanted to make sure that you understood what the changes were in this law and the implications of it for our staff and our administration. Sorry, Becky, go ahead.
Oh, and it says there's no fiscal impact. I just want to point that out. And every amendment to it, there's no fiscal impact.
Yeah, well, then
Be aware.
the next one is LD 474. And that one centers around student discipline, and it's student discipline primarily for students in grades under grade 5 and below. And what it says is that we are not permitted to give out of school suspension for students in grades 5 or younger, except in 2 situations. One, if they violate the federal gun law, or kind of back to the same language that you saw in the restraint law, imminent danger of serious physical injury to the student or others. So only if there's imminent danger can we send a student home for the day. Now, it is not uncommon to have a student be defiant, overly defiant, and you have administrators and staff who are spending their entire day trying to get a student to do what they need to do, and they're defiant. After hours of working with a student, you call the parents, it's just like, you just need to go home. They can't do that as of October 18th, unless there's imminent danger. So again, where is that student going to go? Who is going to be with that defiant student? We can't use out of school suspension. Now, if a student is suspended and does meet that criteria, you cannot suspend for more than 3 days. Okay, well, maybe that makes sense, except there are a lot of times where if you have a situation where you have a student that is so disruptive that you need the student to be out of school for a while, then you have administration and you have staff who need time to put together a plan to help the student return in a way in which they can be successful. And that may take more than 3 days. You know, you're consulting experts potentially from outside of the school, and it can take time. You're not going to have that time any longer. Another part of the law is that recess cannot be withheld. And this would be, if you have recess at the middle school, it applies there. You can't withhold recess unless it's the only time in which you can provide restorative interventions with your students. Now, we already discourage taking away recess from our students because the kids need their recess. But now you're not allowed to unless, again, it's the only time for restorative interventions. I provided in here, I copied the law so you could see and others could see exactly what does restorative interventions mean. I'm not going to read that to you tonight. The other thing is under expulsion hearings for high school or middle school, because you're not able to expel under students under age grade 5, which you wouldn't want to anyways, but we now, in our notice letters that I send, the hearing notice letters, I must provide a list of free and low-cost legal services. Those providers, I must provide that information to parents.
Okay.
I've already talked to you about workplace bullying. And there is a policy that is going to be going to the policy committee next week. We talked just a little while ago Jim mentioned the binding arbitration. Well, there are other things here that actually impact negotiations with our association. Historically in Maine, school boards have always had the right to decide how schools are going to run when it relates to educational policy. Establishing schedules, deciding what the school day is going to look like, staff transfers, things like that, that we get to decide based on the best interest of the students in the running of the school district. When it comes to planning time, prep time, and staff transfers, those are now permissible means of bargaining, okay, or permissive subjects of bargaining. That means that the association and or the board can put forth proposals on those topics. And both sides have to agree to negotiate those topics or not. If you are in the negotiations team, you know from firsthand experience that you can receive lots and lots and lots of proposals. And it's easy to get bogged down in all of those proposals. And after weeks and weeks of negotiating, it's easy to give something up and to agree to something at the end that you would not have agreed to at the beginning of the negotiation process. And so that's the risk of where permissible bargaining comes into play, and that you may be giving away ed policy. And that will tie our hands. You're also required now to meet and consult and provide written notice to the association every time there's a change in ed policy. So if we're going to modify a schedule, if we're going to modify the calendar, we're going to do something with transfers, anything along those lines, we're now going to have to meet and consult and provide written notice to the association on all of those topics. So that is a new responsibility.
Is that in advance, Pat?
Huh?
Is that in advance? Our school board meeting notes are not sufficient to meet that?
Some of the ed policy work is done administratively. It wouldn't necessarily even come here. Last year, we modified the schedules in our buildings, right? That is really not a school board matter. The school board doesn't set what the schedule is going to be, but that's really ed policy. So now we administratively are going to have to reach out and sit down with the association and officially do a meet and consult.
So consult can be interpreted, I assume then,
Can be in,
like interpreted that they're almost negotiating in a sense.
well,
That's what I'm wondering.
well, I don't think an agenda, just sending out an agenda is sufficient. I think it has to be more direct and intentional. And meet and consult means that you need to sit down and you have to have a meaningful conversation. You don't necessarily have to modify your plan, but you have to engage in a meaningful conversation and truly listen to the other, their position of the association and their perspective, and be open to their ideas, and honestly consider them as you develop ed policy. I'm just trying to see what else. See, another thing, and you can read this on your own. I'm not going to read it all to you, but attendance policies, LD 1050. Our attendance policies are part of our handbooks. The law now requires that we turn it into a board policy. So we're going to have to take those procedures that are in the handbooks, such as if you miss so many days of school, this will impact your grade, right? All of that. That will have to be policy, and once it's approved by you, we then have to submit it to the Commissioner of Education. How does that
figure under the school board's responsibilities? I mean, is that? I'll go in and I'll read the statute and see.
Okay,
and see
policy.
how it correlates. Just feels out of the-
Something else that I want to make sure that you're aware of, you all heard last year, I believe, that Juneteenth, which is June 19th, is now a state holiday. If we are in school on June 19th, that cannot be a school day. That will have to be a holiday. Now, if it falls, this year it falls on a Sunday, that means that we would not hold school on June 20th if school were still in session, because oftentimes if a holiday falls on, like if it's on a Saturday, you recognize it on the previous Friday. If it's a Sunday, you recognize it on the following Monday. You as a board will get to decide whether that's a paid holiday or not, but we cannot operate school on June 20th this year, should students be in school, but that will mean for the central office. Central office will be closed that day. And I think that those are, the next big one is fair chance in employment. We can no longer, as of October 18th, on our job applications, we can no longer request criminal history records on the initial application. So our applications say, have you ever been convicted of a crime? Yes or no? And there are like 3 different questions that we have. We can't ask those questions anymore. And we can't ask them prior to them going through the interview process. Once it is determined that the employee is, what's the terminology? That they're qualified for the position. Once we've determined that they're qualified for the position, then we can go and ask we can do a background check. But we can't ask them for any criminal history or criminal record upfront. Does that mean no other jobs can either?
Are they okay too?
They can apply. So,
This was passed by the main
yeah,
government.
yes. So anyways, some of these were so significant, they're so significant, the changes that I really felt, and I know it's getting late and I'm sorry, but I felt like it was extremely important for you to understand the significance of some of these changes, especially the significance of some of these changes on your administration and on your staff.
It's unfortunate that these changes all happened during COVID, because the opportunity to testify for and against any of this was limited.
Yep.
If at all. So it was I don't want to call it a lame duck session, but it's kind of a lame duck session, because you don't have any, you get perspective when people come in and testify, and when there's some things like this that would come up, the room would be filled with board members, with teachers, with administrators to testify for and against these things. And if that didn't happen, and I'm sure it didn't, because I would have testified, and I haven't testified all year. So it's an unfortunate way to have laws happen.
So that's what I have for my report. And then we do have 3 very quick executive sessions.
But you say,
It's all up to you guys. I think they can be quick on
she
my
always
end.
deflects the blame.
And Sophie, student reps do not stay for the executive session, so you're welcome to pack up.
You're in tears,
So
aren't you?
thank you very much.
About that.
And Quinn, reach out to me if you would like to.
I would, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, administrators, for everything.
If you have time.
There is no more votes out of any of these executive sessions. So you can disconnect the live stream. We're not voting at all.
Okay, same here.
So we do need a motion to go into executive session. Motion to go into executive session. Second by Veronica. All those in favor? Nancy and Veronica?
Hi, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.